All right, guys, welcome to the first 15-minute Feature Friday of 2019. Thanks for joining. So today we're going to be covering Milestone's XProtect Backnet integration. The reason why I'm kind of covering this is I've gotten actually an increasing number of questions on it over the last kind of 6 months, and I don't think there's a lot of awareness into what it is and what it can do. And I know over the course of the 4.5 years I've been with Milestone, I've been asked randomly about it and never really knew too much about it. So I decided that I would do a little bit of research into it and maybe share what I learned. So we're going to cover Milestone's interpretation of the Backnet integration today. So I think before I get started, I have to do at least a brief introduction of what Backnet actually is. So what does Backnet stand for? Well, it stands for Building Automation and Control Networks. So BACnet. It allows for the computerized communication of multiple building systems to communicate among each other and facilitates the automation and control of different systems between them. So basically, it is a smart building kind of technology. So the history of it is actually kind of interesting. It's a very old standard. It started to be developed in 1987. It was adopted into an ISO standard in 1995. However, it's still relevant today because it's actually been last updated last year. So it's, 2017 technically. But so it's still a relevant standard today. And as far as I know, it's still used. So how does it work?
There are more. I think there's 3 in there.
I'm going to go ahead and mute you, Jared. So how does Backnet work? It's kind of broken up into these 3 different tiers. It starts out with a Backnet device. It starts out with a Backnet device. Those devices can be made up of multiple objects, and those objects have certain defined properties against them. And this is kind of an abstract idea, but basically, if you look at that kind of infograph on the right-hand side, it works a lot like a hardware device works inside of Milestone. We have this device in the system. That device can have multiple components to it, which are basically objects, inputs and outputs in this case. And then those objects can have different properties associated with them. So we could have a temperature or a door state, or an output could go to a strobe light or some other kind of indicator. Most of these properties are going to be read-only. So they're going to be informational states, temperature, door state. However, some of them are writable. So some of these could actually be text or ANSI characters we write to the values for different purposes. Or maybe they're just triggering points. We change from a false to a true. Backnet is actually it's pretty simple in some ways, and it actually can get very complex. So there's different layers, different link layers it can communicate over. So I picked some of them out that we may know. So Ethernet is traditional, just kind of Ethernet cable, serial or RS-232. However, it also can communicate over traditional UDP or IP. And then even one of the ones I found interesting was Zigbee, which basically opens up the world for some wireless communication. And you may be aware that some of the access cameras lately have been coming out with Zigbee support, which, if I infer this correctly, means we could maybe connect those cameras through a Backnet network and actually be able to communicate with them. So it's actually kind of interesting. Another thing that I did find interesting was how Backnet networks work. So they can work over traditional TCP/IP networks. However, Ethernet networks are identified by MAC address only, so they do require things like Backnet routers or Backnet gateways. And we can also incorporate it into something called Modbus, which is something that is supported on a Backnet network through Backnet gateways. But we actually have a Modbus plugin for XProtect as well, so I just thought I would mention that. One very important thing I found out about Backnet is it's not a programming language. It's not a scripting language. So you're not telling another system to do something. All you're doing is sharing data between systems. What happens with that system really depends on how that system's programmed. So in the case of XProtect, our rule engine, our alarm engine is going to be what drives the data from Backnet. So specifically to the XProtect Backnet integration, there are two different kind of modes it can be in. It can be in both of these modes at the same time. But basically, our plugin allows XProtect to become a Backnet device, and or it also allows XProtect to monitor other Backnet devices on a network. So there's kind of three different components that are defined inside of the XProtect Backnet device section. Basically, we have a device object that is defined, and that's just because the standard requires it. So that identifies Milestone as a Backnet device on the network. We actually have a unique vendor ID number that's registered with the standard. If you care, that number is 784. So we're actually the 784th Backnet vendor to be registered with the standard. So that's super exciting. The second component allows us to get insight into camera data. So those the second type of objects are going to be cameras. So every camera on the system is going to be defined as an object. And basically, there's four different values that can come out of a predefined property that is in there. Basically, if it's in state 1, that means motion is detected. If it's in state 2, that means motion is ended. State 3 allows for a device responding, and a state 4 allows for a device not responding. So basically, we can do two things with this. We can have a motion detection property, or we can have a device state property to go through there. And then the third type of object that is part of this first type is the event object. And basically, the event object allows has a writable property inside of it that allows you basically to trigger a user-defined event. So think of it almost like a generic event in the sense that it allows a third-party object to trigger an event within Milestone. Now, the other side of it is XProtect operating as a Backnet device. Monitoring a Backnet device. And basically what this allows us to do is we can set a trigger event. This is much like a generic event as well, and we're looking for different conditions. So we're either looking for a device property value to be equal to a certain value, to be greater than a value, or less than a value. We can also trigger any time a device's value changes as well. All of these events can trigger either a rule or an alarm or both. So anything we can do with the rule engine, we can use these events for, basically. So this next slide is on use cases. I've never seen a Backnet system before, not a true one. I don't know exactly how it would be used, but I came up with some things I thought from an engineering perspective I thought we could do within Milestone. So these are kind of my 5 or 6 different use cases I came up with. For the system acting as an actual Backnet device, we could activate lighting controls based on motion from a camera. So if we had another system that was controlling lighting in a building, anytime you walked into a room and we detected motion on the camera, we could activate lighting in a room. Working the opposite way, monitoring devices, we could change a smart wall preset based on a fire alarm. So if the fire alarms were communicating over a Backnet protocol, we could change the smart wall preset or make an alarm go off inside the smart plant. If we were connected again to like an escalator Backnet device or some other thing that's monitoring an escalator, we could move a PTZ camera over to that if maybe somebody hits the emergency stop. We could pull up an elevator camera on a smart wall if a call button is pressed. And if we were monitoring maybe a temperature control, we could pull up an alarm and pull up a camera on a smart wall whenever temperature in a room was greater than a certain threshold. So in this case, I said 90 degrees. Very similar to the lighting one, turn on an AC when somebody's in a room where we detect motion. So those are just kind of my 6 use cases I came up with. There's obviously probably more. All right, so specifically to the XProtect plugin, what are the costs and requirements? Well, the MSRP on it is a $7,000 SKU. SKU is that right there. I'm not going to read that, but basically the SKU can be ordered through, I think, partner services, if I understand correctly. The license itself is attached to the SLC, so there isn't some other special license you have to do. It just basically gets added to the SLC. There is also a 30-day grace period or a 30-day trial included with that. So this actually differs from what the documentation says, but from what I understand, it should work on any C code product. When the documentation was written, we didn't have Pro Plus and Express Plus yet. It was last tested with XProtect Corporate 2017 R1. It was developed in 2014, but I'm using it today on 2018 R1 and it is working. So it should work with any current version of C code products. It does have a couple limitations, and I think these are important to understand. One, and this is probably the biggest one, because BACnet devices, networks can be so complicated. One of the biggest limitations is the BACnet device and the event server must be on the same subnet. In other words, they must be on the same local network. And I can definitely see this being a challenge in some situations. Additionally, anytime you make a change to the system, if another BACnet device is monitoring XProtect, you have to restart the event server, which is not a huge deal. It's not a big process, but like if you make a change to a name or something like that, you have to restart the event server for that to be reflected. So with that said, I got a demo for us. Go ahead and jump right over to that. Let's get rid of Skype. All right. So the first demo I wanted to show you is us monitoring Milestone as a BACnet device. So let me get rid of these. This application I have up right now is basically a BACnet Explorer. So it allows me to see BACnet devices on my network. And this is how another system would interface into XProtect using BACnet. So if I had another system that wanted to monitor lighting controls and turn on for motion, this is how we would do it. So basically, I can see my system here. This is my device. And if I right click on my device, well, it's already added, actually. I've added it to my system. Now, these are my different objects that I have. So I can basically see my camera object here. That's my access camera I have. And I also have a trigger property as well, which is my other type of object. So I'm going to go ahead and subscribe to both of these. And by subscribing to these, I'm basically going to get any value changes. So I'd like you to keep an eye on the value for the Access 1 camera, number 1 camera here. Right now it's set to 0. And if we take a look at the manual, just really quick, basically, anytime 0 is not set, motion detected is 1, motion ended is 2, device responding 3, device not responding 4, and 9 is unknown. So what we're going to see is this should jump to a value of 1 and then 2 and then back to 0. Let's see if that actually happens. So I just started moving the camera, so it's at 1. It jumped down to 0 because it reset. We should see 2 in a second. Yep, and now it should jump back to 0. Additionally, if I unplug this camera and give it some time, it's going to go to value 9, saying it's kind of an unknown state. And then we should see a value, I think 3, indicating it's not responding. 4 is not responding, I guess. And then if I plug it back in after a period of time, which I'm not going to wait for it to come back, it will actually jump to 3 responding. So that is how we can monitor a BACnet device. How to actually subscribe to a BACnet device is a little bit different, and I'll show you that in a second. But I did want to show you inside of this management client kind of some of the things related to this. So when you install the BACnet plugin, it's just a single installer. You'll get a new BACnet objects area. Additionally, under your licensing information, you'll get a BACnet device, and you'll see that it expires on the 8th of next month after my 30-day trial expires. Additionally, if you go up under tools and options, you get a whole new options section inside of the settings section for the management client. This allows you to configure the BACnet client, so if you want to watch other things, or the BACnet server if you want other devices to watch you. Basically, this is incredibly simple once it's working, and it took a little while to get it working. But once it's working, you can just come in here and add a new BACnet object. If I want to subscribe to one, a BACnet object will come up. I'll look at my local network, and right now, all I can see is myself. I don't have any other BACnet objects on my network. I tried to get a simulator working, but I had no success doing that. But I do have a brief little video I can show you on that. But basically what you'll see here is I can see my camera, and I can also see my test user-defined event. So it's easy to add these in. So if I want to add my camera in, I can easily see that. And then if I come on down here under properties, I can easily add any of these properties to subscribe to. So in this case, if I wanted to look for my camera value and hit OK, I now get these different match cases. So if I wanted to say anytime the camera is equal to a state of, what am I looking for here? Anytime the camera is equal to a state of 3, state of 4 not responding, I basically now can create an alarm around this and have it so whenever the camera is not responding, I get an alarm. Obviously, there's better ways to do this, and this is not something you would do with BACnet, but that's just an example of how you would use these value triggers to trigger an alarm. So real quick, I'm going to go ahead and pull a video up. And this is a video from Custom Development. They did have a simulator working. I'll go ahead and kind of talk through this. This is the other way around. This is basically Milestone subscribing to other devices on the network. So what they have up on the screen right now is a BACnet simulator. And he has a device that has an ID of A00001. And it also has a value, which is a temperature value. So he's going to go ahead and add a new BACnet device, which is at A0001. He's going to turn on the change of value functionality, and he's going to add a property that's going to monitor the temperature. So in this case, he's looking for the present value. And he's going to say anytime that value is greater than a certain threshold or equal to a certain threshold, which in this case, he's going to say 107 degrees Fahrenheit. And he's going to create an alarm. And basically, the simulator is going to creep up. Right now, it's at 106. It's going to hit 106.5, I think. And when it hits 107, that alarm will be triggered. Takes a while for virtual temperature to increase, I guess. All right, it hit 107. Just take my word for it. And that triggered the alarm over here. So that's just a simple way we could look for a temperature. And then the last thing I wanted to show was that value we can write to. So this is writing to a milestone value. I've created a user-defined event. And anytime you create a user-defined event inside Milestone, it will show up through the Backnet integration. So I can see that basically I have a user-defined event called test UDE, and I have this trigger property. And if I change it from false to true, present value should change. Let's see if it worked. I have a rule set up to write to the rule log. And it just wrote a rule log basically saying BACnet. So actually, this was from earlier. There it goes. Now it changed to 1. Now I should get a new, there it is. So now I got a new user-defined event, basically just now. So that could be used from another system that basically says anytime there's an event, just write to that value, and it will trigger a user-defined event, which then could trigger rules or trigger an alarm or whatever you wanted it to do. So, and that's BACnet in a nutshell. It's obviously a lot more complicated than just kind of going through this, but the BACnet integration actually I think is pretty powerful, and it's pretty cool, and has a lot of potential if you really wanted to tie it into a true building automation system. So with that said, if no one has any questions, that's about it. I don't see any questions in the chat. All right. Thanks, Josh. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. I don't think we'll have a 15-minute Feature Friday next week, so we'll see you in 2 weeks. And otherwise, have a great weekend. Thanks for your time.